Hi, welcome to Prime Recap. A gigantic, hungry white shark is terrorizing the beaches of Amity Island, and now the local sheriff is in charge of hunting this monster. Today we will recap the story of the 1975 movie, Jaws. A young couple are camping on the beach with some friends, when they decide to get away from the group and go to a more quiet part where they could be more comfortable. But when the girl enters the water to wait for her companion, the boy, who is already so drunk who can't stand up, ends up passing out on the sand. Unaware that her boyfriend is unconscious, the young woman begins to swim while waiting for the boy, but while swimming something appears underneath her and starts dragging her from one side to the other as if she were a rag doll. When she manages to free herself, the girl holds onto a signal buoy and tries to ask her companion for help, but even before she manages to wake him up, the creature demonstrates that it has not given up on its prey and drags it back to the bottom of the sea. At dawn, the drunk young man wakes up and, not finding his girlfriend, decides to call the authorities and report her disappearance. As soon as the first officers arrive on the beach, they immediately call Police Chief Martin to investigate the girl's disappearance. As soon as he arrives at the scene, the man starts looking for her, and while they are walking on the sand, another officer finds her already lifeless and her body covered in crabs. Martin was already filling out the report, and the coroner calls to report the probable cause of death, a shark attack. Knowing the danger that locals and tourists are in, the policeman asks his secretary to list all the water activities that are planned for the whole month, and goes to a construction store to buy some materials to make signs signaling that the beaches are closed. As he is leaving the store, another agent arrives to warn that some scouts are doing a 2-kilometer test on one of the beaches, but as soon as he approaches the place, the mayor of the city comes right behind and prevents him from warning people about the incident and also to interdict the beaches. According to the man, as the July 4th holiday is approaching, this is a very important time for tourism and consequently for local commerce, so the mayor wants to keep the beaches open so as not to scare away tourists. With his greed, he even manages to convince the coroner to change the probable cause of death to an accident with a boat propeller. The next morning, Martin's children decide to go to the beach with some friends and, afraid of what might happen, the man goes along with them in case any incident occurs. While watching the scene, the policeman sees a young man playing with his dog, but after a few minutes he notices that the boy is looking for the dog that suddenly disappeared into the water, leaving behind only the piece of wood he was using to play with. Even with the disappearance of the dog, Martin does not take any immediate action thanks to pressure from the mayor, but this was a big mistake. Shortly after the dog was attacked, the shark appears once again and makes a new victim, this time a boy who was swimming with his buoy, which was the only thing left to tell the story. Seeing the strange movement and the huge bloodstain, the adults, already imagining what is happening, run desperately to the edge to help the little ones out of the water. A few hours after the shark attack, the mayor calls an urgent meeting with residents to discuss the measures that will be taken, in addition to announcing a reward of $3,000 for those who eliminate the predator. When everyone is arguing about whether to close the beaches on holiday eve or not, Quint, a shark hunter, starts scratching a blackboard to get people's attention and announces that with his experience, he could locate and shoot the shark with extreme ease, but only for the sum of $10,000. Since the money the man asked for is more than triple what the city and residents are willing to offer, the mayor thanks Quint for his proposal and says he'll think about it, but doesn't even consider paying the entire amount. At dusk, two locals who want the $3,000 reward go to one of the city's marinas and drop a piece of meat into the water, securing the bait to the dock structure with a steel chain to prevent the animal from escaping. However, they quickly realize that it was not a good strategy when the shark takes the bait, and when trying to get away, it manages to take the entire structure with it, including knocking the men into the water and dragging one of them to the middle of the sea. Desperate not to be caught, the fisherman starts swimming back to the shore, while the shark swims after him, still dragging the dock structure, and almost manages to catch him. Luckily for them, the only victim of this attack was the piece of meat they wasted. The next morning, a large number of fishermen head to the docks and head out to sea to hunt the mutated shark. As Martin coordinates the departure of dozens of boats, a shark expert oceanographer who was hired by the city, named Hooper, arrives at the scene and asks to analyze the remains of the first victim. When carrying out the investigation, the scientist comes to the conclusion that it is impossible for those injuries to have been caused by the propeller of a boat, stating that with all certainty what took the young woman's life was the attack of a great white shark, and due to the size of the bite, a much larger one than those normally found. After finishing the investigation of the girl's remains, Martin and Hooper return to the beach and realize that the hunters have already returned bringing a huge tiger shark, but when analyzing the dimensions of the predator's mouth, the scientist comes to the conclusion that that is not the animal that attacked the young woman, as the bite size of the animal that the fisherman shot is much smaller than the marks left on the victims' bodies. Knowing that a shark's digestive system is extremely slow, Hooper suggests taking the animal to the lab and opening its stomach to see if the boy's remains are still in the creature's stomach. At dusk, Martin and Hooper go to the place where the shark's body is and open its digestive tract, where the scientist finds only the remains of some fish and other junk like a license plate. Trying to find the shark's tracks and prove to everyone that he is still alive, the two men get on a boat and set off to the area where the predator made the attacks, but the only thing they find in the middle of the ocean is a fishing boat about to sink. Before towing it, Hooper puts on his wetsuit and jumps into the water to check for damage to the hull. Upon arriving at the bottom of the vessel, he finds a bite mark with a tooth bigger than his hand stuck in the wood, and when the scientist was going to check the huge hole in the hull, a human head comes floating out of the place, giving such a big scare on Hooper that makes him drop the tooth and flashlight at the bottom of the ocean. With complete certainty that the great predator that made the victims is still alive, the duo goes to the mayor to try to convince him to close the beaches for the holiday, but as they lost the colossal animal's tooth, the mayor insists that they are hysterical for no reason and maintain their decision to keep the beaches open for the good of local commerce. With the great news that the evil fish has been eliminated, thousands of tourists arrive on the island to spend the holiday on the beaches, and totally neglecting the safety of the population, the mayor begins to persuade the residents to enter the water to demonstrate to the travelers that there's nothing to worry about. Seeing his eldest son carrying a small sailboat to the ocean with his friends, Martin calls him to talk and manages to convince them to go play in the canal where theoretically it is safer as there is less movement in the water to attract the shark. While the entire population is in the water, a large fleet is watching the waters looking for signs of the shark at Martin's request, but despite all the police's concern, things seem to be pretty calm. However, the mood changes completely when some beachgoers see a dorsal fin next to them, causing everyone to panic. Desperate, people start running out of the water, while military boats start to approach to eliminate the creature, but as soon as they get closer, they discover that the shark was actually two boys trying to scare people with it. When everyone is calming down after discovering it was all a false alarm, one of the bathers spots the real shark in the canal, right where Martin's son is with his friends. Trying to save him, the policeman runs towards the boys, but before he can even reach them, the huge predator of the seas manages to turn the boat of a boy that was nearby, and devours his body with extreme ease, leaving only part of his leg that falls to the bottom of the sea. Desperate, the boys end up capsizing their boat, but despite the scare, almost all of them manage to get out of the water unharmed, with the exception of Martin's son who went into shock and ended up passing out. After another attack, this time in front of hundreds of people and even journalists, the policeman finally manages to convince the mayor to hire the shark hunter to exterminate the giant predator. Despite the initial disagreement with Hooper, Quint ends up agreeing to take them on the hunt, and after preparing all the equipment, the trio sets out to sea. With the demarcation of the possible hunting territory of the animal already done, Martin starts throwing some bait in the water, and like all good fishing, the only thing they have to do is wait. After some time looking for signs of the creature, Quint begins to feel a hook on his fishing rod, and prepares to pull the shark, but as was to be expected with a creature of this size, the spool line breaks easily. Knowing that the animal is now on alert, Quint asks Hooper to speed the boat in another direction, while Martin throws more buckets of bait to lure him to them, but while the officer is distracted, the huge white shark appears behind him. Seeing the creature's size, Martin immediately says that they should radio for a larger boat, but Quint totally ignores the suggestion and goes to the cabin to prepare his harpoon. After assembling the weapon, the hunter asks Hooper to tie the harpoon string to a barrel, and as soon as the animal approaches, Quint lands a shot right at the base of the huge predator's fin. His plan is to use the thrust that the plastic barrel suffers to prevent the shark from being able to submerge and lose them, but even though it is a great idea, the animal manages to drag the barrel to the bottom of the ocean, causing the trio to lose sight of it. With nothing to do, they head to the cabin and stay there until the hunter monster returns to the surface. In the middle of the night when they are having dinner, the trio starts to feel some bumps on the boat that takes everything out of place. It turns out that the huge shark of more than 8 meters in length and 3 tons is making several attacks against the boat, which results in several cracks in the fragile wooden hull, through which the water begins to enter. To make matters worse, with the impact a kerosene lamp falls to the floor, starting a fire inside the vessel, and as if that wasn't enough, the mutated shark even ate the boat's wiring, leaving them totally without electricity. After a long night of draining all the water and trying to repair the cracks in the hull, at dawn the barrel they attached to the animal comes back to the surface. Believing that the object has come loose, Quint asks Hooper to bring it back to the boat, but as they are pulling the rope, the huge shark appears in the water right next to them and pulls the tether back out to sea, which ends up injuring Quint's hand with the friction. Wanting to continue after the shark and capture it, the hunter orders Martin to speed up the boat, but he disobeys the order and goes to the cabin to request help from the Coast Guard over the radio. Seeing that his request was completely ignored, Quint is furious and destroys the device with a baseball bat, an extremely stupid attitude, because in addition to being surrounded by the biggest predator in the seas, they are in a very small boat and already badly damaged. After doing this stupidity, Quint takes his harpoon and manages to attach another barrel to the animal, but even receiving several shots made by the men and with even greater thrust, the shark manages to submerge quietly, but only to rise again a few seconds later. Seeing the barrels floating once more, Martin Hooper catches and ties it to the boat's cleats, but the policeman ends up passing the rope behind the scientist, which causes his leg to be crushed against the wooden structure when the shark tries to go to the bottom once again. But their problems seem to have no end. Attached to the boat, the huge creature tries to swim away, which makes the boat almost capsize, which just doesn't happen because Quint starts accelerating, initiating a true tug-of-war with the shark. After some time in this dispute of strength, the giant fish gets tired and goes to the surface to try to break the rope with its bites, but taking advantage of the predator as practically immobile, Quint performs another harpoon shot, trapping the third barrel to the animal's body. Upon feeling the hook, the shark pulls the boat back, realizing that soon everything will be flooded and that the vessel could literally break in half if they continue this tug-of-war. The trio tries to free the ropes from the cleats, but as the rope is extremely stretched by the force that the animal is exerting, Quint has no option other than taking his machete and breaking the metal frames before the predator rips the back of the boat off. Finally free, the shark submerges again, this time withstanding the thrust of 3 barrels at the same time. This animal has simply colossal strength. Even with the vessel almost completely submerged, the creature does not give up and continues to make its attacks, trying to sink them, turning the hunters into real prey. Trying to lure the shark into shallower waters where they could corner it, Quint pushes the engine too hard, which eventually explodes. With no way to get around and knowing that if he doesn't do anything all 3 will be devoured, Hooper decides to enter a water cage and lure the creature close enough until he can hit it with a poison dart, but while he's descending, the mutated fish starts hitting the cage as if trying to open a can of sardines, and to make the scientist's situation even worse, the dart simply falls to the bottom of the ocean, leaving him with no way to defend himself. Not satisfied, the shark continues hitting the cage until it destroys all the bars. As he could die if he stayed inside, Hooper uses the door of the structure that opened behind him and goes out there, taking the opportunity to swim towards a small cave at the bottom, where he could hide while the creature is busy destroying the steel bars. After getting tired of playing with the cage, the mutated fish jumps onto the boat, splitting the back of the hull and tilting the boat because of its enormous weight. The men who believe that Hooper has been devoured are forced to hold on to where they can to avoid falling straight into the animal's mouth, but to Quint's misfortune, a cylinder of compressed air lands right on top of his hand. Unable to hold him, Martin watches the man slide slowly into the shark's mouth where he is completely devoured, starting with the legs. A pretty ironic fate for a shark hunter. With the boat almost completely submerged and knowing that it will be the next one if he doesn't do anything, the policeman takes advantage of the fact that the creature went through the cabin window to attack him and throws the same cylinder of compressed air into the animal's mouth. Wanting to end this nightmare once and for all, Martin takes Quint's gun and goes to the pole where he waits for the shark to try to attack him again, and as soon as the mutated predator appears on the surface, the policeman shoots him right in the cylinder, which was still in the animal's animal, causing a huge explosion from the inside out that generates a true mess with the pieces of shark that fly through the air. Just then, Hooper returns to the surface and finds Martin victorious. Happy that this nightmare is finally over, the pair use the barrels as buoys and start swimming back towards the city. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.